There you see him coming to the line after, it sounds like hanging on for the last couple laps, just trying to make sure that the tires don't blow out.
Well, much like Bill, I saw the same thing. I saw him pull off the outside wall, and I was thinking, well...
NASCAR has just been rocked by the most devastating scandal in professional racing history, and what's come to light behind the scenes has completely shattered the credibility of a sport once seen as the gold standard of American motorsports. What started as individual controversies has exploded into a comprehensive crisis that reveals how deeply the problems run throughout NASCAR's entire organization, and the shocking details that have emerged will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the sport's integrity. The first devastating blow came when Kyle Larson's Indianapolis 500 preparation turned into a complete disaster that has jeopardized one of NASCAR's biggest cross-promotional opportunities and exposed the dangerous risks their star drivers are taking for publicity stunts. Kyle Larson hit the wall in Thursday's IndyCar test session at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, in what can only be described as a catastrophic failure that threatens to derail NASCAR's most ambitious promotional campaign while potentially injuring their biggest star in the process. The crash details reveal just how serious this incident could have been. Larson's car exited turn 1 wide and slapped the wall with the right side. His car slid down the track to turn 2 and then headed back up the track, hitting the wall again with the right side of the car. But wait, there is more. This wasn't a minor incident. This was a double-impact crash that could have seriously injured or killed NASCAR's premier talent while he was participating in a publicity stunt that has nothing to do with NASCAR's core business. The fact that Larson walked away uninjured doesn't diminish the catastrophic risk NASCAR is taking with its most valuable assets. Larson's admission reveals the fundamental problems with this entire venture. I just was starting my qualifying laps there and just got really tight, just a bunch of understeer through turn 1 and ran out of space off of turn 1. I kind of fought the understeer feeling Wednesday, and it carried over to Thursday. When your star driver is admitting to fundamental car control problems during what should be routine testing, you're witnessing systematic failure in preparation and risk management that could have resulted in tragedy. But the most damaging aspect of Larson's crash is what it reveals about NASCAR's priorities. Larson, seeking to become the first driver to compete in the Indianapolis 500 and Coca-Cola 600 in the same day since 2014, represents a publicity stunt that puts individual drivers at massive risk for minimal competitive benefit to NASCAR. The historical context makes this even more infuriating. Larson attempted to run both the Indy 500 and Coke 600 last year. He finished 18th in last year's rain-delayed Indianapolis 500 and arrived at Charlotte Motor Speedway well after the Coca-Cola 600 began. He was set to climb into his Cup car but never got the chance when rain ended the race early. NASCAR learned absolutely nothing from last year's complete failure and is repeating the exact same mistakes that resulted in their biggest star missing their own marquee race. This represents organizational incompetence of the highest order. But if you think the Larson crash was bad news, wait until you hear about the corruption scandal that has rocked NASCAR's leadership to its core and exposed the systematic conflicts of interest that are destroying the sport's competitive integrity. The explosive revelation that Jim France wanted to fund a car for an upcoming Cup Series race represents the most blatant conflict of interest in professional sports history. And the garage revolt that killed the plan has exposed just how corrupt NASCAR's power structure has become. The Athletic reported Thursday that France would fund a car that would have been fielded at Sonoma Raceway by Spire Motorsports with Jack Aitken behind the wheel. However, the piece reported that backlash from the garage resulted in the plans being scrapped. Think about the implications for a moment. The CEO and chairman of NASCAR was literally planning to compete against the very teams he regulates while making the rules that determine their success or failure. This isn't just a conflict of interest. This is systematic corruption at the highest levels of the sport. The most damaging revelation is that this wasn't France's first attempt at this kind of corruption. The revelation that France wanted to fund an entry was not new. He had entertained the idea in the past, but a deal never materialized. This proves that France has been systematically plotting to abuse his position for personal gain, and only garage pressure has prevented him from turning NASCAR into his playground where he competes against the people he's supposed to regulate fairly. The anonymous team owner's assessment was devastating. It makes zero sense for anyone who owns a series to compete in it. It's a bad look. But calling it a bad look dramatically understates the severity of what France was attempting. What France tried to do represents criminal-level corruption that would result in immediate resignation and possible prosecution in any legitimate business environment. The fact that he's still in charge after attempting this level of systematic abuse proves how broken NASCAR's governance structure has become. The cover-up attempts make this scandal even worse. Sources with knowledge of the situation did not elaborate as to the nature of the bad timing, but pushed back against the speculation of it being tied to the ongoing antitrust lawsuit between NASCAR and 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. When you have to push back against speculation about connections to ongoing antitrust lawsuits, you've already lost all credibility. The timing of France's corruption attempt while teams are literally suing NASCAR for anti-competitive behavior represents either stunning tone deafness or deliberate provocation. One team owner called France's actions confusing, but that barely scratches the surface. It's a clear betrayal of the sport's core values. While NASCAR faces an antitrust lawsuit and works to build unity, its most powerful figure secretly planned to enter a car under the guise of loving the sport. Using his power as NASCAR's top authority to quietly fund race entries isn't about supporting the sport. It's a clear abuse of power that shatters competitive integrity. The fact that insiders tried to downplay it as a manageable one-off shows just how normalized this corruption has become. There's no such thing as an acceptable conflict of interest in a sport built on fairness, and France's actions prove he either doesn't understand or doesn't care about the responsibility his position demands. NASCAR is facing a full-blown crisis, with CEO Jim France's deep ties to IMSA creating major conflicts of interest, like using his team, Action Express, for next-gen testing. At the same time, NASCAR continues to risk its top driver, Kyle Larson, in dangerous publicity stunts like the IndyCar crossover, even as he's dominating in Cup. These aren't isolated issues. They expose a system where leadership is prioritizing personal business interests and media stunts over safety, fairness, and the future of the sport. When the CEO is effectively competing against the teams he regulates and no one's held accountable, NASCAR stops being a sport and starts looking like a rigged show.